Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the Shrewsbury Biscuit podcast. I'm your host Alex Whiteley, and joining me today is somebody who's been on use. I did this the wrong way round, Niall. Usually, what I do is I sweeten people up by bringing them on the biscuit, and then be like throw them on you, so I can be like, ah! But joining me is
I went in at the deep end.
You really did. This is Dr. Niall McCann, a National Geographic explorer and a conservation director at National Park Rescue. I said it better this time. Last time How are you, sir? You good?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah. Enjoying the change of the seasons, and the birds are all singing. The lambs are out, so it's a good time to be alive.
We've got a hedgehog, right? And I saw him the other day, and he was like, "Oh wow, this is cool, spring." And then it started snowing. I bet he thought, I woke up to
what the hell's going on? Yeah, we've just found some hedgehog poo in our garden for the first time. But my sister-in-law bought us a hedgehog house and a load of hedgehog food about 2 years ago when we didn't have a hedgehog, but now we've got one, so we can finally use the hedgehog house and the hedgehog food and stuff. So I put it all out in the garden.
This hedgehog's funny. He's so tame. He just comes up to me. He doesn't come up to me, but like if he's like a couple of feet away from me, he won't run away unless I make any sudden movements. So he'll come right up to me. And if I move too quickly, then he's like, "Oh, still not too sure." Anyway, guys, thanks very much for joining us to listen to this podcast. I'm really excited to bring it to you because we have Niall McCann, who's from Shrewsbury originally, who went and conquered the world. Would you like to tell people, like, where is it you come from in Shrewsbury? Where is it you were raised? Where did you start your life?
Yeah, raised in Gaynes Park, went to Oxon School. And it's interesting. Oxon seems to have been a bit of a funnel for interesting people. My brothers have gone on to do very interesting things with their lives, but you've got the Foster brothers who were very, very good cricketers. The Joe Hart, of course, went through Oxon, and various others. The Chantry brothers, again, professional cricketers. So it was an interesting cohort that time in the early 90s, with a bunch of people that came out of Gaynes Park and ended up going on to do some interesting things with their lives.
I bet that made everybody want to go to that school. Like, go there, you'll be famous. You're going to do something with your life, you know?
I do wonder whether it's actually been used as a recruitment tool, the fact that there was this crop of folk going through there.
Isn't it something?
It may well have fallen far in the last few years, I don't know.
From there, how do you become a National Geographic explorer? What happens? How do you get raised into that?
I wouldn't say it was my schooling. I'm not convinced that Mr. Parkinson and Mrs. Purdue, for all of their wonderful qualities as teachers, had much of a formative impact on me in terms of my trajectory as an explorer. That really came from family, and the fact that I was surrounded by family members for whom adventure and exploration was just the done thing. It wasn't something that was unusual. So going out and having an adventure close to home or further away from home was just de rigueur. It was just the thing that people did. And that was great for me as a youngster, just realizing that this type of thing's accessible. So I think the biggest thing stopping people doing really interesting adventures is that they think it's inaccessible to them. Whereas really, it's not at all. You've got Nestcliff just on your doorsteps. You can have one hell of an adventure getting to Nestcliff from Shrewsbury, having an adventure around there and then getting back again. There's so much we can do on our doorstep, let alone further afield. And I was very lucky that my parents and then my brothers going on and my grandparents previously opened up the possibility of adventure and exploration, just made it seem like the done thing.
I always remember, when I was young, we used to live in Dorley in Telford, and there was these woods. They're not there anymore. They kind of removed these woods, which was such a shame because we used to go there with our rucksacks, with a picnic, and disappear in these woods for a day. Days. That's not true. For a day, so and we'd set up camp somewhere, and we pretend we were adventurers and exploring when we were younger, because that's the idea as a kid, isn't it? You want to go on these adventures, and it's really exciting, something really appealing about doing that as a kid. And you're right, Shropshire's just the perfect place for it. So much greenery around.
It's an amazing place to grow up. You're right. It's England's most rural county. Very few people, loads of greenery around, loads of really wonderful places such as Nestcliff, the Sniperstones, the Long Minns, Earl's Hill. There's so many great places to go and have little adventures as a kid. The key then is taking that childhood enthusiasm and maintaining it through puberty. Most people hit those awkward teenage years and their enthusiasm for the natural world and their enthusiasm for going outdoors and doing good things kind of dies a death as you pick up an interest in girls or boys or whatever it is you're interested in. But then, for whatever reason, I guess I wasn't that interested in girls or boys, and I was more interested in doing all these other things instead, and kept it going into adulthood. I always find it a bit of a shame that people would say, "Oh, I'm too old to do this now." I was like, "Well, no, you're not. You're just too old in your head.
Yeah,
just get out and do it."
When you're young, and you're going with your family to explore, what are you looking for? Are you looking for the thrill, the excitement? Are you learning? What's the most exciting and most appealing thing to you?
For me, from a young age, the thing I was always looking for and wanting to encounter was wildlife of any kind. That could be something as like a grass snake. I still remember the first time seeing a grass snake, and one of the people we were with picked it up, and I couldn't believe this. It was a man holding a snake. It's absolutely extraordinary. So that type of thing from a young age just really instilled in me a love of finding adventure in the natural world, looking for animals to then try and sneak up on, get as close as you can to, having these close encounters. That really fueled the fire in me. And I've taken that on in my career. And that's been my route, I suppose, into National Geographic, is my work in biology. And my desire to be close to animals and see animals and study them and then conserve them. There's a natural progression in that. But it all started with crawling around the woods and the hills in Shropshire looking for wildlife.
I wonder who else went on to do something famous doing that in Shropshire. Mr. Charles Darwin himself, that's how because there's a lot to be admired about just what you're right. Wildlife is beautiful. We talk about hedgehogs, and it's something beautiful where you've got this thing on a doorstep because you don't look for it. If you don't look for it, I don't think you're going to see it, are you? Especially if you live in an urban area, like I remember the first time I ever saw a fox in the town. This is in Wrexham, actually. It wasn't in Shrewsbury. And I was just kind of like, whoa, until I did some research. Foxes are everywhere in an urban environment. And it's just crazy to think about, I love it.
I bet lockdown has really improved people's ability to spot wildlife in their local area, because we've all spent so much time walking the same routes near your house, or being in your garden a bit more, just looking a little bit more closely at things. And I bet people have started to appreciate that there's a hell of a lot more life than they realised, and now they want more of it.
Yeah, well, we've seen the piles of cars outside places like the Longmynd and the Wrekin, and these beautiful spaces where you can go out and walk. It's very appealing, isn't it, when you're stuck in the house and you've got these beautiful places out on your doorstep where you can go and walk in. I was very lucky. I've spoken to a few people that have been out there and done similar things to yourself. But one of them that really struck me was Jordan Romero on What's the Difference. I think it was like 13 when he climbed Mount Everest, and there was like this huge not conspiracy, but the news of following him around, and they were causing such a noise because they accused his family of child abuse, basically, because they were dragging this kid along, putting him in these extreme conditions. How young were you when you started to get to those sort of high octane, probably something a kid shouldn't be doing environments, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think my parents weren't anywhere near as kind of borderline abusive as.
It's not abuse, though, is it? If a child, I don't know, but
yeah. Personally, I think what he did is absolutely extraordinary, and the fact that his parents gave him the fuel to do that is amazing. Yeah. My parents gave me the fuel as well, but they certainly weren't pushy. So for me, the first, what you would describe, I suppose, as a high octane adventure was straight after A level. So I was 18 at that point, and then spent a month cycling over the Himalayas in Kyrgyzstan, China, and Pakistan. So that was certainly out of the ordinary. But by that point, I was quite mature. I'd done lots of local adventures by that point, cycling and rock climbing, little bits of mountaineering and that type of stuff. So I felt prepared for it. And by me going through that, and then my other brother, middle brother Rory, going through a similar thing at a similar time, age 18, canoeing the Yukon River in Canada. My younger brother, he felt that he was just that little bit more advanced because he'd seen the bigger brothers go through it sooner. So his first big high-octane adventure was straight after GCSE, so age 16. Ooh. Spent 26 days cycling around Iceland, just him and Dad. It was pretty extraordinary. So I'm slightly jealous that because I was the guinea pig, I was trialed out a little bit later. Finn got to have just those slightly earlier adventures as a result of Dad realizing that you could do this to your children without damaging them from a slightly young age.
Well, I mean, that sounds like the absolute dream for me. Cycling around Iceland with your dad. Wow, that's beautiful. When because you'd be doing this from a young age, even from the age of 18. I mean, like once you've done it for a while. And you go in one place and you go in another and you experience in one thing and this it must be really hard. Does it become difficult to come home?
Oh no, the opposite. It makes coming home even more sweet. Honestly, spending time in the Himalayas or sub-Saharan Africa or wherever it is, flying back over the green and pleasant land is always a wonderful moment. And coming back to Shropshire to begin with, or now I live in South Wales, which is a beautiful place. I absolutely love coming home, and the more I go away, the more I love coming back.
I do actually appreciate that because I always talk about it on the show, but I'm very proud of it actually. My wife being from Colombia and we've been there a few times, and me being able to get up close to a different culture, and different way of life, and it is completely different. People are completely different. Whenever we go see a family in Bogota or it's a completely different experience. The whole family nucleus is completely different to a family in the UK, and I'm enjoying myself when I'm there. I find because everybody sort of lives in these really high apartments. Well, I'll find myself standing on an apartment block at Hernan's and just watching and enjoying, taking it all in. But then at the same time, I feel relieved when I get home. It's really weird how that happens. What about natural when it comes to conservation? Why is it important to you? What you said? There's a drive there. There's a natural sort of focus for you. Where does that come from?
Yeah, it's shifted over time. So it came from just being a youngster, loving wildlife, and therefore wanting to see it. So going out and wanting to be close to animals, and the types of places you get really close to really exciting animals are far lands from the UK. We've got some wonderful wildlife here in the UK, but not much of it because we've killed it all and we've destroyed all the habitat and turned it into roads and farms. But if you go further afield, you can start to have extraordinary encounters with truly wonderful wildlife. And I started pushing for that from a relatively young age, going further and further afield and encountering pretty unbelievable things. I've been charged by a tiger. I've handled an 8-foot-long anaconda. I've been treed by an elephant. I've been on foot with rhinos. All these types of things, which were fulfilling this childhood fantasy of wanting to spend time in nature and encounter wildlife and have these amazing experiences. But then over time, I suppose you start to realise that actually this stuff is dropping off a cliff in terms of numbers. We are removing wildlife at a rate of knots that is totally unsustainable, and that becomes just kind of viscerally painful to see that just from an individual animal welfare perspective, let alone from the perspective of wanting my children and my grandchildren to be able to see these types of things. And then as I've got a little bit older, I've realized that there's something more fundamental about it. Like just we as human societies and the planet in general needs functioning landscapes full of wildlife with biodiversity. We need the diversity of life in order for us to be able to survive or thrive. So biodiversity is absolutely integral to maintaining climate regulation. If we lose our biodiversity, climate change is going to happen no matter what we do with fossil fuels. It's absolutely integral in terms of the ecosystem services it delivers to people, in terms of clean air, clean water, the soil that we need to grow all our crops, the flood mitigation that we need, the pollination services we need, all of that. It's absolutely critical in terms of pandemic prevention. Intact ecosystems regulate disease outbreaks. The fact that we're creating this interface with wildlife, deforesting, pursuing the wildlife trade is increasing our exposure to zoonotic diseases. So it's changed for me from being just having a love of wildlife to then a respect for wildlife and a worry that it's being lost, to now understanding that the loss of wildlife poses an existential threat to humanity, and this stuff has an integral, intrinsic right to be there anyway. And so I suppose my concern has heightened in the years as I've started to learn the connectivity of it all and how we must protect this and how every single one of us should be a conservationist. Because if you're not a conservationist, actually, what are you for? If you're not trying to make the world a better place, if you're not trying to live in a nicer world, what are you for?
And that's the problem, isn't it? Is people are living for today, not tomorrow. When it comes to consumerism and the problems that the extent of that causes. Even with like Elon Musk with the Tesla things, people are like, oh yeah, electric cars and everything, but you don't think about the batteries and the rate people are buying these cars, the batteries once they're used. What happens to a dead battery? People, it gets buried in the desert somewhere, it's one of these things where it's difficult for someone like me who's kind of standing on the outside and seeing all this happen, because it's very harmful to see. When you see the plastics in the oceans in Malaysia, and you see the wildlife being killed in Africa, and the pollution is one of the worst things for me. When you see the houses that are on huts in the water, and it's just rubbish all around them. It's heartbreaking.
But it's happening here as well.
Yeah.
The amount of littering, the air pollution, the flood issues. You're in Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury suffers because of bad farming planning further upstream. Every single year we have a flood as a result of not having enough trees in the watersheds. Whereas if we're putting nature back, Shrewsbury would no longer have a flooding issue. There's so many things that are happening close to home. And I think one of the mistakes people have made over the years is thinking, well, actually, this is just something which is going to happen in the future. Whereas really this is happening now. And making little changes to your life will make your today better as well as your tomorrow. So cycling instead of driving, you will be fitter, more healthy. You will get outside and experience nature. Eating less meat, you will be less likely to have a heart attack than if you're eating five steaks a day. And you're making the world a better place while you're at it. There's so many little changes that can be made that actually make your life today so much better, that are also contributing to the world in general.
How do you, when it comes to things like farming planning or housing development? I mean, I'm in Sutton Grange right now, one of the new housing estates, and I feel guilty for saying this because we moved here because it was a nice place. But at the same time, it's a shame because that's all farmland that's gone. It's all land that could have been done with something else. But at the same time, like, how do you combat that? It must be frustrating for you because these guys are worth billions. Any industry that's sort of just destroying the environment for profit, they're powerful people.
Yeah. So what needs to change is the idea that nature is not an asset class itself. So this is changing. The Treasury, the UK Treasury, has just released a report called the Dasgupt reports about the value of nature. And what we're now understanding is you have to factor in nature to your economies. So if you get rid of a wood and put a housing development on there, for example, or a road or whatever it is, you need to calculate what you're losing by getting rid of that wood. Well, you're losing the pollination of all the insects that live in that wood. Pollination drives 35% of global agriculture. Got to take that into account. You are losing the shade and the cooling effect of that woodland, which has a massive impact on climate change and everything else. You are losing the oxygen generating properties of that wood. You are losing the water cleaning generating properties of that wood, or its flood mitigation properties, or all these other things. There's so many aspects of this thing, let alone carbon sequestration and the massive impact that has on us as well. So you actually have to be able to take into account the dollar value of a hectare of land left natural versus being converted to something else. And that is now possible to do. And you can actually make a comparison as to what is going to cost us more. And what it turns out is that more often than not, as in over 50% of the time, leaving land as it is actually better for us economically than converting it. So what we need to do is restore land. So let's say we need new housing estates because people need places to live. That's guaranteed. We've got masses of what you would call brownfield sites that can be redeveloped, places that have got old bits of industry or other forms of development that can be redeveloped for housing. But when you do develop these housing initiatives, what they also need to do is they need to have green spaces in them. Green spaces are great for people's mental health. They're vital for climate change. They're vital for biodiversity. They're vital for ecosystem services. So having green spaces, trees everywhere, trees lining our avenues. How beautiful is that? Great. It's good for everything. Why on earth have people got plastic lawns? Plastic lawns should be criminalised. That shouldn't happen. We should be having little wildflower patches everywhere. Everyone wants to see wildflowers. They're great for nature. They're great for the planet. They're great for humanity. They just need a little bit more forward thinking to understand that actually for our own survival, nature is integral. So we need to develop. That has to happen because we have people that need to be housed, but we can do so in a way that isn't totally detrimental to the planet.
I always say we should go up. Like we do Bogota, we'll just go up in the big apartment block.
That's the other way of doing it.
I mean, I'm lucky at the moment because we've got the Rebrook right behind me. I'm going to take my boy. The sun's out today. Hopefully it stays out. We're going to go and, going to have a paddle in the water. I don't know how cold it's going to be, but we're going
to be cold.
Yeah. We discussed last time you came on my show, which was a different show. People want to listen to it, but we discussed the hazards of going out and exploring around the world. Now, like there's an unmeasurable amount of danger when it comes to traveling to some of the most remote parts of the world. But you seem to have witnessed it all. You seem to have seen it all, because you had the accident, didn't you, when you broke your back as well, which was looked horrific. The last show you were talking about the square off with the pirates that you had. Traveling across the ocean on a rowboat. How do you set yourself up psychologically for things like this?
Yeah, I guess I'm not risk averse. Is probably the easiest way to describe it. So again, it was, I suppose, part of being brought up in a family where risks were managed, but risks were also taken. So we would go rock climbing, or we would go on a canoeing trip as a family, and we would do all these little things where there's an inherent risk to them. But that's not a bad thing. There's an inherent risk to everything. There's an inherent risk to getting in your car and driving to work, or whatever it is you're doing. It's just there's a perception of risk in other activities, which puts a lot of people off. But no matter what we're doing, you're trying to manage the risk that you're in. And I guess I'm just willing to manage greater risks than many people, and find a bit of a buzz in it as well. Lots of people, myself included, you seek out these thrills, these risky situations, because there's a buzz, something, that joie de vivre that you get out of being kind of on the edge and then coming back and talking about it around the campfire. That's hard to replicate if you're just living a normal 9-to-5 life.
Oh man, that's a great way of looking at it, I suppose. Especially the risk factor of everyday life. Why not do it in the Himalayas instead of between Shelford and Shrewsbury every day? And I wanted to talk. I didn't get to talk to you last time about this because we didn't have much time. But the elephant conundrum that's going on in Africa right now, the pandemic with the elephants, is that something that you're working on at the moment? Can we explain what's going on first? I think that's probably the most important thing. Explain what's going on with the elephants, and then
So elephants are suffering extraordinary amounts of persecution by poachers as a result of demand for ivory, principally in China, but in other parts of the world as well. The United Kingdom is still a major consumer of ivory, both as a transit and as a destination hub. So elephants, when I was born in Africa, there were about 1.2 million elephants. So that's 1981. And here we are now in 2021, and there's around 400,000. So it's been a 60% loss in my lifetime. And that's pretty catastrophic. There's been obviously way worse losses historically. There were probably over 20 million elephants roaming Africa in the Middle Ages. And now here we are, a few 100,000 left. Crazy. Many of the populations are isolated. Half of those elephants are all in one area in southern Africa, around where the Zambezi is, so on either side of the Zambezi River, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, that kind of area. And the other 50% are spread around the rest of the continent. And they're suffering really quite awful persecution. And it's all because of trinkets, because people want to have a bit of carved ivory on their mantelpiece, which is it's just a sign of disposable income. It's a sign that you're wealthy. In the same way as someone here might want to buy a Porsche instead of driving their VW just to show off how wealthy they are. In other cultures and in ours, people like to show it off in other means, and having an ivory carving is a way of displaying your income. The fact that to have that ivory carving means that an elephant has to be killed is shockingly greedy.
It's horrible. And then you take into account there's a virus that go around killing all the elephants too.
You mean what happened in Botswana last summer? We still don't know what killed them. So it could be a virus, but there isn't strong evidence to suggest that it is. It could be a cyanobacteria in the water, so harmful algal bloom, but there isn't really strong evidence to suggest that's what it is. We just don't know what it is. But what happened was that about 700 elephants died last year, between March and July last year in Botswana. which is a lot.
Yes,
That's a
of course.
significant number.
Especially when they're already dying anyway. There's got to look after them.
Absolutely. And the fact that we don't really know the cause, like there's various things that have been suggested, and there's little bits of evidence to support various potential theories, but we don't really know what it is. Makes it all the more worrying that it might happen again. And here we are in 2021, and we've lost 69 elephants in a similar area, similarly unexplained, in the last few weeks. And I'm hoping that this isn't the start of what happened last year. I'm really hoping that we don't lose another 700 elephants from an area that, well, they would say they can afford it. They've got quite a few elephants, but really, if you start losing 700 a year, every single year, suddenly things get pretty serious pretty quickly.
Especially when there's already a threat to them anyway. You want to look.
Yeah.
How worrying that is, especially.
Yeah, it is worrying, and you're right. But I think the big thing to take into account is the fact that elephants are incredibly intelligent. They are very emotional. They have very strong family bonds. So it's worrying for us, but it must be absolutely terrifying for these elephants that are seeing their friends and family members dying around them. They don't know why. So what happened last year when the 700 died was the main bulk of that elephant population all scarpered, as you would. They fled the area where everyone was dying, and they fled to the east as far as they could go to run away from this death. And imagine that starts happening again. The knock-on psychological impact that will be having on the elephants is terrible. That in turn has a negative impact on people, because stressed elephants are much more aggressive. So you're more likely to have human-elephant conflict, which is one of the biggest problems happening in Africa. So this entire situation is catastrophic from all perspectives.
Wow, and what a problem to have to land on your doorstep. Niall, come here. You got people like me on your podcast. What's your opinions on this? We just don't know. It must be so frustrating to keep talking about it, But I'm sorry.
No, I love talking about it, but I'm a typical scientist, and that I won't give a definitive answer unless there is one. and there's very few definitive answers to anything in life, unfortunately.
Yeah, it really is. Have you got anything coming up at the moment that you're going to be working on?
The main thing I work on day to day is that I help to run an organisation called National Park Rescue. I'm one of the directors of National Park Rescue. And we aim to identify national parks in Africa that cannot cope with the poaching crisis, and then to try and resuscitate them. So we're currently working in a national park in Zimbabwe called Chisarira National Park, which had lost 3,000 elephants in a 10-year period, previously lost all of its rhinos, very bad losses of buffalo and lions and everything else. And we've been there now for 3 years, and we've completely turned the park around, had a quite extraordinary comeback. Poaching is down by 98%, elephant poaching is down by 90%, lion numbers are up by 40%, etc., etc. So we've had a quite extraordinary impact.
Wow.
And that's my day-to-day work is for National Park Rescue, making sure that we can make these places safe, and then try and grow the organisation to take over more parks, start managing more parks, to expand our net of protection as widely as we possibly can.
98% drop in poachers. That's amazing.
Yep, and that was an independent study performed by the local wildlife authority and an NGO. And in a 2-year period, they recorded 98% fewer incursions by poachers inside that national park.
But that's just a group of people that were there before you guys were. No conflict. We do what we want, boys. There's nobody's going to stop us. You guys rock in. They're like, oh, we've got to go.
You couldn't be more accurate. That's literally exactly what it was. The poachers were acting with total impunity, knowing that they just weren't going to be disturbed. Basically, there's a network of roads inside the national park. The park's big; it's 2,000 square kilometres, and there's a network of roads, tracks really, that's 540 square kilometres in length in total, and yet almost all of those were undrivable. Totally undrivable. So the rangers couldn't patrol in large parts of the park because the roads couldn't get them there. What we've done is open up the roads and start deploying the rangers all around the park again. And suddenly the poachers are very surprised that there's a bunch of chaps with AKs suddenly walking around again. Whereas previously they've had total free reign of many of the far-flung parts of the park.
How bad of a crime is it to be a poacher in like Africa? Is it can you go to prison for it? Is it just a case of yeah?
Country to country, it varies. But if you kill in Zimbabwe, where I work, if you kill or are trafficking in, so if you have the products of endangered species or species that are specially protected, which includes elephants, pangolins, rhinos, pythons, If you are trafficking or killing any of those, it is 9 years in jail.
Ooh.
And you do not want to spend 9 years in jail in Zimbabwe. So it is seen very, very seriously. And these are the natural assets of the country. A country that generates a huge amount of its income on tourism. Botswana, as an example, generates between 10 and 12% of its GDP on people wanting to come to that country to look at elephants. So every person that kills an elephant, you are robbing the rest of your country of their income by doing that. And as a result, the law is very, very tough on those people.
Good. Good. And get what they deserve. Is there something that is happening in the world at the moment that you'd love to sink your teeth into? Something that you'd really, somewhere you'd like to go to observe or to work on, to investigate? Is there something you'd like to do?
I would like to sort out British national parks. Our national parks are an absolute shambles. We've got 11 in England, and then some more in Scotland and Wales, and they do not deserve the name national park.
Okay,
so they're elaborate sheep farms in many cases. They're not there really to preserve nature. Biodiversity isn't front and center. If you go to a national park in Southern Africa, there is an amazing sense of anticipation as you drive towards the national park, and suddenly you start seeing more and more wildlife. You drive through Dartmoor, you will see ponies and sheep. Good luck seeing anything else. It's just we really need to have a strong think about what our national parks are for. They should be for recreation purposes, for people to go and enjoy, but you will enjoy them more if there's nature there, as opposed to just farms. So we need to change the land use of our national parks for our own purposes, for nature purposes. We would also generate significantly more money out of national parks that have got nature than out of national parks that don't. To use Wales as a country, as a total example, 90% of the country is set aside for sheep farming, which generates under 2% of the GDP and way under 2% of employment. If you took just 10% of that area set aside for sheep farming, 10 national parks, and stocked it with wildlife, allow wildlife to come back, think of all the jobs that would be created for the people that would be wardens or tour guides or shop attendants or car park attendants or whatever it is in that place. Think of the amount of enjoyment for all of the people visiting it. Think of the economic benefits in terms of coming to visit. Like if you give nature a chance, you can make so much more out of an area of land than if you've got it as an elaborate upland sheep farm, which is basically the state of our national parks at the moment.
Yeah, when it comes to like stocking up wildlife and things, wasn't beavers? Was it that's just been reintroduced into beavers in the UK? That's been reintroduced. How extraordinary! I had no idea.
It's amazing.
I didn't know they were native from the UK. I didn't know that.
Lots of things are native and have been extirpated. Wolves, bears, lynx, all of these things used to be here and no longer are. Great. I would love in my lifetime for lynx to be introduced, and that's genuinely a possibility. Wolves and bears is a little bit less likely. There's quite a strong farming lobby and quite a lot of parents with children that would be quite concerned about having those types of things. But landscapes are so much more, firstly, exciting. Secondly, vital. They have their vitality back when you have predators in those landscapes. The landscape of fear means that areas get cleared of your herbivores like deer that are currently chewing all the trees down, meaning that trees can't regenerate. So suddenly you get regeneration of trees. This has happened in Yellowstone National Park and many, many other places. Beavers create amazing wetland landscapes, which are wonderful for biodiversity, then flood mitigation, clean the water, all of these things. If we start bringing wildlife back, we will see our own lives improve immeasurably, as well as putting something back for nature as well.
Now, how do we fight the the fat cats out there that are kind of like, oh, you know, I'd rather build a council estate, I'd rather build this or that, rather than introduce beavers and a wildlife park. How do we do this? Because like money is the only thing that seems to be talking at the moment in the world, and it's sickening.
But it's a false economy. If you think that building a car park here is better than having a wood, then how much is it going to cost you for the flood damage repair? Yeah. Because that car park can't absorb any rain. Think about the actual cost long term of all of these things, as opposed to the short term money, which will be made by one person or one development company. the actual cost to society of this is enormous. So two things have to happen. Firstly, the government has to realise that we need to be thinking about cost to society as opposed to earnings of one small individual who's probably a donor to the Conservative Party, let's put it that way. And then secondly, it needs to become taboo in society. If you are the type of person that is trashing nature, you should be seen as a pariah, in the same way as someone that trashes other people is seen as a pariah. So we need people to start to recognise that preservation of natural places and an encouragement of wildlife is integral to us as a species, as well as vital in terms of planetary health. What we're looking at nowadays as a result of COVID-19 is that there's the promulgation of this theory of One Health that you may have heard. The idea that human health, animal health, and environmental health are totally interlinked. And if we want to promote human health, we have to take into account environmental and animal health at the same time.
I mean, that's beautiful, by the way. But like, there's something going on in Shrewsbury at the moment. I don't know if you're aware, Niall, but with the slight relax of COVID restrictions, the quarry in Shrewsbury has been inundated with kids sort of chilling out there, drinking, leaving mountains and mountains of beer bottles and rubbish. And there's this ongoing argument on social media at the moment: should they, shouldn't they? You know, these kids have been cooped up for a year. Should let them off, blow off a bit of steam. And then there's people like, but they're leaving the litter. And then there was this guy who put this obnoxious comment like, "Oh, well, he's keeping the park attendants in with a job when they pick up the litter." You know, this is an ongoing battle. What I think that the most sensible way to look at it is going and partying in the quarry isn't necessarily the only way to go and blow off some steam. There's no excuse to go and destroy the environment there by leaving your litter everywhere. And what you're talking about, Niall, is, you know, is passing on those responsibilities to your children. Tell those kids that it's important to look after your environment, because then we don't have problems like this where they don't care about leaving their Budweiser bottles everywhere. It's wrong.
I think what you've touched on there is the don't care aspect is really important. So littering is a sign of disconnect from society. You are disconnected. If you're willing to trash your local environment, your local street, your local the quarry, your local park, by leaving litter, you are disconnected from society. So that's a systemic issue. This isn't just about people blowing off steam. That is a systemic issue that people no longer feel or have never felt a connection with society and the world around them. So that needs to be addressed at government level. We need people to feel as though they are responsible citizens, that they are stewards of the planet, stewards of their country, stewards of their town, stewards of the environment. And littering, for me, it's one of the most obvious signs that there's a deep malaise in society and a disconnect that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I wonder if we can come up with a solution for that, because, you know, we're not going to do it on this show, and probably not going to do it in the next few weeks or what have you. But like, I'd just love to see a place where, you know, maybe yes, the youth can go out and enjoy themselves, because, you know, we've all been young, we all know what it's like to be cooped up, but at the same time, they're not causing so much damage, you know, because.
Take your little home. There's just no excuse for
that. That is unforgivable, and the people defending kids for making the quarry in such a state, you shouldn't do that. No.
I used to go drinking in the quarry. I loved going drinking in the quarry, but I always took a plastic bag to bring my bottles home with me.
Well, there you go.
Your bottles of hooch and your wicked. I absolutely loved all that. But then you take it home with you. There's simply no excuse for littering.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be a huge economic effect on you know, economic. When the world opens again, I imagine it's going to be like, I keep saying, I've said it a few times on the show, like the buffet is now open. The buffet is now open. People are just going to scatter, aren't they? They're just going to create havoc around the world, especially us Brits. You know, it's like we turn up with a towel and some sunscreen looking for a sunbed. That's what's going to happen. Have you been collecting data during, you know, not just you, but you got, you know, as a science, data about what's been happening during the pandemic to wildlife? Has it flourished? Has it affected it anyway? And are you expecting things to change when the world opens again?
Again, typical science answer: it depends. so in some places, wildlife has absolutely flourished, and we're seeing Llandudno, the wonderful images of the goats going back into town.
I saw that,
which is brilliant. And there's many places where wildlife has been able to come back because there hasn't been quite so much pressure on it. But then there's been other situations where wildlife parks have been stockpiled in greater numbers because there hasn't been the same levels of law enforcement patrolling happening. So poachers have been able to go and operate with impunity. But then some countries, because you can't travel, it's difficult to transport your products. So if you're trying to take ivory from one place to another, it's very difficult to do that because there's police roadblocks everywhere. So country to country, it depends. What's happened in general, I believe, is that people are starting to understand the link between wildlife health and human health. Because COVID-19 came from a breakdown in conservation. It came from spillover of a disease which was in a bat, probably to an intermediate species, potentially a pangolin, then into a human being, which then spread around the world, shut down the entire planet, cost us $12 trillion. That means that people now realize there is a direct link between what we do with wildlife and what happens to us. That, I hope, will not be forgotten in the coming months and years. And if we remember that, and we remember that if we treat nature with respect, our own prospects are so much better. That will be the most positive thing that could possibly come from this entire pandemic.
Amazing. No, you've been amazing to talk to. I always love talking to you. And I did say I'll need to get you back on What's the Difference, because I want to do like part 1, part 2, and part 3. Because I feel like whenever I speak to you, I cover like 10% of you because there's so much to you. I literally breezed over your adventures around the world. So, you know, but I feel grateful to have spoken to you today. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Nice to speak to you, Alex, again.
Is there anything you want to shout out? Is there any sort of social media, any websites, anything you want to tell people before you go?
Please do have a look at nationalparkrescue.org, my organisation. And as well, if you're interested in this type of thing, which everyone is, endpandemics.earth. Because we're all very personally affected by the pandemic at the moment. And I'm co-chair of End Pandemics. And National Park Rescue is one of the organisations that are involved in that. So please do check out those websites. And if you want to write to me, my personal website is niallmccann.com.
Fantastic. I'm doing the lawn mowing outside. Did I not know I'm recording?
My daughter's screaming in the background as well.
I know. That's why I thought I better let you go. You can deal with your family. Guys, before we go, I want people to check out our website, which is www.theshrewsburybiscuitpodcast.co.uk. That's made for us by our friends at Web Orchard. And also, I need you guys to keep your eyes peeled. I've been working to try and get some CVs out to radio stations. I mean, I thought, why not do this thing on the radio that I do? I'm kind of good behind the microphone. Why not? And I managed to get my own radio show, which is crazy, for a brand new radio station called Splash Damage. It's based in Liverpool, but it's international, so I can do it from my studio here. And I'm going to be creating a show called Naughty Talk, because I think one of the most less talked about decades of music is probably the noughties, you know. So I'm going to be playing noughties music and a bit of podcasting type talk as well. So look out for that. I'm really excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's really good. It's the beginning. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for catching us. I'm going to stop now before the lawnmower starts and ruins the whole show. Niall, you've been amazing.
Cheers, Alex. Great to talk to you.
Very much. Peace out.